Greetings, folks. My name is Jess Tiergan, and the following video is a response for week 5 of a action research class for Aspen University. In this video, I'm going to explore the topic of action research through presenting a topic that is of interest to me and considering some of the basic considerations and some of the basic elements that would need to be put in place to actually create this as a research project. So the first question that we're going to look at is, what is the problem to be solved? And the problem that I would seek to solve through this action research project would be a group of first responders here in northern Colorado that are actively experiencing suicidality and that are actively struggling to feel like they have support to meet their needs. So the problem would be that this particular group of first responders here locally are struggling to stay alive. And the resources that are available to them are not suitable. They're not being able to show up in a way that is actually providing them with the support and providing them with the sense of both community and skills that they need to handle this experience and, in a lot of ways, this trauma response that they are having. The goals that I want to accomplish with this action research plan, the primary goal that I would desire to accomplish would be to increase the support that is available to this particular group of first responders. Right now, the support that's available to them is the ER, is maybe the crisis walk-in center, and a couple of them have individual counselors, but even the individual counselors that they have, I've heard them express that they're concerned about letting their individual counselors know how much suicidality is part of their life, because they're concerned about being hospitalized or they're concerned about losing their jobs. So they're concerned about the cost. And so to a great degree, they suffer with their suicidality in silence and in isolation. So the primary goal would be to give them access to community, to give them access to non-pathologizing counseling, and to give them access to group support meetings. I desire to see the first responders feel like they have the ability to live with suicidality and to decrease the sense of isolation and shame commonly experienced by this population around SI. Long-term goal might be for them to have a decrease in the suicidality, but honestly, the short-term goal would just for them not to suffer without skills and for them to not suffer in isolation. And whatever the longer term experience was or wasn't would not be necessarily part of the goal. So the people that would need to be involved with this study, obviously there would be a lot of people that would have to give approval for it. So those would be the initial people that would have to be involved. But after that, the people that would actually need to be involved with the study, the first responders would need to be involved. To some degree, their departments might need to be involved. This could go either way. Their departments might need to be involved from the standpoint of if there was a safety concern with them at work, or if they needed time off of work, or if there was some sort of crisis, that their department knew that they were part of a mental health based study. Maybe their department wouldn't know what it was, but they know that they were part of a mental health based study, so that they could have the ability to get off work, or if something became overwhelming, they would be able to let their captain or supervisor in whatever format know that they were going to seek help. Also, it could be a way that if they did have a crisis while they were on shift, that their supervisor could know to contact one of our clinicians. So that would be something that we would have to discuss with each individual first responder of how much they would want their department to know or not know, and find a covert way to let their departments know that they're working with a research project without them knowing actually exactly what the research project is about. We would also need on-call counselors. So we would need clinicians, counselors, therapists to be available during the actual support group meetings to do the interviews with folks. But also I would want to have counselors available on call 24/7, because most of these folks work 24/7. And while they were given the opportunity for these support group meetings, if something were to come up later on, I wouldn't want to have them to be back at the mercy of the community resources again. So this could mean 3-4 clinicians that were trained and prepared that could cover a couple shifts a week max. And, most likely they would not be needed, but that they would be available for this population in case that was a thing. We would also need space to meet, and so this could be at one of the local offices, or it might be something that would need to be hosted in a larger location. And so if so, that could be like at the hospital's, one of the hospital's meeting rooms. If so, that would be something we would need them to be involved with. And ideally, we would have some local stakeholders that would want to financially support it, so that we would have the materials that were needed, any books, any even things like coffee and snacks to have available at the meetings, that those could be provided, and some sort of compensation for the clinicians that were on call would also be very beneficial. So some financial stakeholders would also be very, very important. The two biggest obstacles that I would foresee with this, one would be that the first responders would not feel safe enough to participate in the group, or they would be distant and withdrawn during the process. And then the second obstacle that I could see being problematic would being that we would have clinicians that were not comfortable actively talking about suicidality, actively sitting in spaces with folks that often have easy access to lethal means, and being able to just sit with them. And whether that be on the phone or in person, and not actively looking for solutions, not actively looking at hospitalization, not being in the preserve life mode, and instead just be present and just provide support and community. I believe the solution to both of these problems would be a mixture of education, security, and safety. So education so that the clinicians understand their role and understand why their role is what it is. Education for the first responders so they know what the expectations are. And they know that if they want us to provide external support, like they want us to help them get into a hospital, we will. But if they don't want that, we won't. And that we'll respect their autonomy up to and including harm to self. And so having that very clear, and having that type of a model where they know how they can help us protect ourselves and protect them in that system. And then the safety piece of making sure that we back up what we say, that if we say we're going to do something in a particular way, that we do it, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And the security piece being that both we allow the first responders to work through their fears, and as clinicians, we work through our fears and our discomfort. And as someone who would be supporting this research, perhaps part of my role would be to provide support also for the clinicians that are working with the first responders, and helping them with some of the fears that are coming up, some of the crap that's coming up for them, and showing up in a supportive way for these clinicians. So the solution or intervention that I would propose implementing would primarily be a support group. So a support group would allow these first responders to meet on a regular basis, to connect with each other, to tell their stories, to talk openly about SI, and to have this experience without fear of non-consensual rescue, i.e. hospitalization, and without fear of it impacting their job. The support group would meet weekly for the length of the project, and the participants themselves would be instrumental in creating and building upon the safety of the group and the sense of community within the group. Suicidality would be talked about openly and freely, and a clinician would be available for additional support if needed. And if a participant wanted a different level of intervention, that would be possible upon request, but otherwise would not be initiated. And so this would be a space for them to process their experiences, to talk openly and supportively, to name the mental health struggles that they're having, to talk about stress, to talk about PTSD, to talk about fear and loss and all the things, and not worry about it being leading to them being disrespected or potentially even their careers being altered because of the fact that they're struggling. How I would measure the effectiveness of the plan. I would measure the effectiveness in 3 different ways. The first way would be through anonymous surveys that the participants would complete online at 4 different points through the experience. So at the beginning and at the end, and then 2 different times in the middle. The second way would be to gather data and listen to the experiences during the group meetings. So to have a clinician that just sits and listens and notes the experiences, notes how the participants are indicating that they are benefiting or not benefiting from the support group as it is advancing. Also noting if any of the folks have had to reach out to the on-call clinician, what that is like for them, and how it was different than perhaps other times they had reached out to counselors or mental health persons in the community. And then the final way to measure the effectiveness would be through interviews that would be completed with the participants at the beginning, middle, and end of the project. So talking with them about their experiences and their goals at the beginning, talking with them about how what their experience has been, how their goals have changed, what things they'd like to see shift as they're creating this project for themselves and their colleagues, and then the reflections at the end of what they learned, what they gained, what they'd like to see different, and then also in the final interview, talking with them about what they would like to see implemented, and the things they would like to see changed in the community. And then talking about if there's any financial support from any of the stakeholders about making that a possibility. So this is the end of this presentation in regards to a project that I would like to see implemented in regards to action research. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Peace.